So,
I think it ended up well. I think it did test me.
yeah.
You know, it's not. It's some of you know, which is the base of everything.
Fucking Jesus.
I can't remember how that. Yeah. I have so much. I can make. Well.
I don't know, Doug. I don't know.
Good evening, folks. We're gonna get started.
They had trouble with him before.
Or phone and or laptop and or
He made a
iPad.
mistake, and I don't know how big it was, but now she texted back, and
We're working on muting some of those here as well. Thanks. Some conversations going on between people. Yours.
Okay, folks, I'm gonna start going through muting people if you don't know how to mute your device.
Christy, can you see if Brent's on yet?
He's joining right now.
Sure. You have something I don't have, I don't know.
Did anybody need anything before we start?
Mhm.
Yeah, before we start?
No? And Brent's on.
And just confirming, Ms. Christie, that Councilor Brent is on?
Yes, he's on, but his camera is not on yet. And it looks like, Peter, you're back.
Okay, well, there he is. September 7th, 2022 City Council meeting is now called to order. Is there any declaration of conflict of interest from any council?
No conflict.
Dana?
No.
Okay. None declared. We have the approval of minutes. Motion?
Wednesday, August 3rd.
Minutes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I move we approve the work session minutes of August 18.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I move we approve the work session of Tuesday, August 30th, 2022.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Aye. There. All right, we have a planning commission report in your packet. Is there any question on that? Okay, moving on. Yes. I attended the Direct Haven reception on August 17th. I've had multiple meetings at City Hall. And that's all I've got for mayor's report for now. Council reports. Rita.
Well, I was able to fill in for you at the Trails and Art Association to present the mayor's award, and it went very well. I was glad to do it. That's all I have.
Awesome.
Yeah, reports, meetings here at City Hall.
Anna?
In speaking with Brian Haberger, who spoke with us a couple of councils ago about the access to the ridge path up in the Creekside building and in the construction area above that. He was concerned about making sure that there was some access to the ridge path from both those communities. And I think he deserves a big thanks for a lot of the work that he did on that through that work, and mostly because of his work, we were able to establish that there have been access was set up, it was always intended, and now the city is working to make sure that that is properly documented and recorded in a place where we can always have that information. And in speaking with Chad, he's working on some signs for all of the ridge path to make sure that we have it properly marked, because apparently the signs that we used to have apparently became collector's items over time, and some of them have disappeared. We're also talking about some other things to do with the ridge path. We know that there's some concerns, and we have been talking about that. And then the other thing, I'm keeping a very close eye on what the cities around us are doing with their encampments, homeless populations, and psilocybin, there's a lot of vowels and consonants to that, magic mushroom sales. As they look to close up shop there, or at least prevent somebody from selling those items there, they're gonna look for places where they can sell that kind of stuff. And that could be a problem for us down the road. I don't know. I would like to hear public comment on that. I'd be willing to accept emails on that or hear people speak on that. I'd be interested to know. We also have the city attorney looking into some of our options on that.
Thank you. Brad?
I spent about 3 days on the ridge path pulling invasive species. Councilor Dana Gold participated in that as well. Attended the DHA event on Sunday at the Centennial Park, and I've been attending the Clatsop County Housing Task Force. This is our third meeting. The Clatsop County is making foreclosed properties available for affordable and workforce housing to local municipalities, and Gerhardt may have the opportunity to get at least one of those. And
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. City officer reports. Chief Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you take a look at the monthly report, there isn't a whole lot of difference from 1 month to the next that has actually taken place this year. Our crime level is still really low. I mean, in comparison to city our size, especially when we only live 2 miles away from Seaside, and everybody sees what's going on in Seaside. I believe they do. My monthly report probably beats 5 of their top daily reports as far as crime, incidents, and human type behavior that takes place. We had no contacts with any homeless in August. Monday I did do one and it was under community caretaking. Took about 3 minutes to take care of that one. The other one was Tuesday, and that was done using law enforcement resources. And Seaside ended up doing a POHR. So that's so far to date, we've only have 2 running into this month, none last month. At some time though, we will be, I feel, have a bigger homeless problem that won't be handled by community caretaking needs. Because the individuals are just gonna go no. They're becoming a little bit more understanding of the laws. They see how Seaside has changed their operation of doing things. From what it used to be over there on 12th and Mechanicum, off of behind Safeway in the river. They're using the mill pond where they're doing open hours. I think it opens up at 4 p.m. at night and everybody moves back in there, of the ones that want to go there. And they all have to be out, I think, by 8 o'clock in the morning. But rarely is the camp empty at 8 o'clock in the morning because everybody has a reason, not everybody. Some people have a reason not to leave. So when I'm looking at, for us here in Gerhart, crime isn't an issue that we're having right now, and I don't see it in any foreseeable future. I don't think we have a lot of violence here. We do get a lot of social type calls, people that are disturbed by things that aren't criminal. And those are the things we can't take care of. The legislature, the court systems have pretty much, I don't want to say shackled us, but they've made it that we can't do it. And that upsets some people because they want something and they don't get it. And that's just the way it's going to be. But I do see as more of a problem for Gerhart going forward is the first one is the entitlement and I want attitudes of people anymore. 2 incidents that I had covers 3 entitlements I want. First one was last week, Wednesday, got called down to the bowling alley, intoxicated, older person refusing to leave. I get down there within 4 minutes. One of the employees meets me out in the parking lot, said that he started fighting customers, so he's being held down on the ground. So I go walking in through the front door and there's 3 gentlemen holding this older gentleman down. But one of the subjects is holding the guy down by the back of his neck, applying pressure. So I called out to him. I said, let go of his neck. The guy doesn't let go. He looks at me and he goes, well, he can still breathe. So I went walking toward the guy that was holding the guy's neck down. And I said, let go of his neck a little bit more forcefully. He let go of the neck, stood up, and took 5 or 6 steps away from the guy. I kneeled down, cuffed him up, took people's statements. Nobody was hurt, nobody was injured, more of a harassment type thing. I loaded the guy up in the car, found out what condo he was staying at, because he owns it. I went up to the Gerhart house with him. He's still in the back of my car in cuffs, so I'm giving him a courtesy ride, detainment. Find out with the office that he does in fact own it. As I'm heading down to his condo, he was also in the back of my car yelling for help the whole time. And so we were heading down to his condo, he goes, you didn't help me. And I said, I did help you. You're in my car and I'm taking you home. And he goes, no, you didn't help me because you didn't arrest the 3 guys that were holding Dad. So I get him out of the car, taking the cuffs off, and I get about a dozen, I'm gonna sue you attitudes. So, I mean, basically, entitlement, I have a right to be here. The restaurant can't kick me out, and you didn't arrest the other 3 guys. I wanted to do so. The guy that's holding the guy by the neck, I tell him to let go of his neck, which a law enforcement officer has a right to do. You don't do those things. I'd be fired for taking down somebody and holding them by the back of the neck. Guy doesn't want to let go of his neck. He tells me that he can still breathe. The next incident was I went and helped Seaside, had an attempt to locate for a drunk driver that was northbound on 101 passing the Schwab. About the time I was southbound on 101 passing Kingdom Hall, 4 Winds, I hear a Seaside unit go out with a drunk driver, stop and go north right here. I roll up. I go take position on the passenger side of the suspect's car. His windows down. The Seaside officer goes back to his unit. The guy picks up his car key out of the console where he had set it when he stopped and sticks it in the ignition. He's going to start his car and drive away. I yell, "Don't start your car up." And he looks at me and says, "Don't tell me what to do, I'll kick your ass." So he doesn't start his car up. After a little bit of deliberation, he doesn't want to do FSTs. He's given the roars warning to only do physical tests, and he agrees to come out and do that. He's taking kung fu stances, dancing around, not following instructions. There's now 4 of us law enforcement officers there, 3 Seaside and me. Gives instructions on how to do the walk and turn, not doing anything really except for all the other things that he wants to do. But during this time, the officer that's telling him the instructions on how to do FSTs, he's told this guy multiple times, "You know what, I ought to just kick your ass. You know what, I just ought to kick your ass." Well, none of us are jumping on him just because he's saying that, because we're not allowed to do that anymore. So he has the freedom of speech of just pretty much saying that he wants to say. The Seaside officer that was doing the instructions finally decides it's time to take him as a refusal, steps behind him, tells him that he's under arrest, and grabs his right wrist to cuff him up. Well, the guy spins real quick, grabs the officer by his vest, because he's wearing a vest like I am. The officer grabs him, and the guy pulls the officer down onto the ground on top. And they hit pretty hard. The Seaside officer busts his elbow up and he's bleeding. Here again, not making a whole lot of sense because I weigh an extra 22 pounds with all my gear on. Do you really want me slamming down on top of it? Took about 10 seconds for me to get him cuffed up. We had him up against the car, searching him. And the whole time he's telling us that if he wasn't cuffed up, he'd be kicking our asses. I told him, sorry, that ship's already sailed. He had his opportunity. So this is what we're encountering more and more, is the sense of entitlement, or the sense of I want. And both these gentlemen were common citizens that you might find anywhere in Deerheart or in Seaside, walking down the street that owns places. It just, they don't respect authority. They don't like being told what to do when they're doing something wrong. And we're going to be finding that, I believe, more and more. And social media is the biggest, I don't want to say to blame, but they are a big culprit in all this. Because there's so much misinformation being put out on social media. There's a lot of lies being put out on social media. And I pulled this one up because I thought it was kind of interesting that there's a group and they started 2 years ago in Milwaukee and they call themselves the Kia Boys. And that's BOYZ. You can look them up on Facebook. There's videos on them. They've actually taken down their how-to videos. But when they started, they had how-to videos on how to steal a Kia makes and models of cars, and Hyundai makes and models of cars under the pretense they weren't teaching people how to steal them. It was in case the homeowner lost their key to their car. We're just showing them an alternative way of getting into it, starting it up. Well, for 2 years it's been going on, and this group was started by a group of kids that were 14 to 17 years old. So in Illinois, last year, they reported a 767% increase in stolen Hyundai and Kia cars. The Chicago Police Department reported that they've had even a higher increase than that overall with all the other cars added into it being stolen. Charlotte, North Carolina reported a 346 increase in Kia stolen. St. Paul, Minnesota reported a 1,300% increase in Kias being stolen and only a 600% increase in Hyundais. I guess Kia is more popular. What I find interesting is because of, here again, it's because of social media pressure being put on the mayor in St. Louis. The mayor and the director of public safety, which would be someone in charge of like me and Josh. They wrote an official letter to a Kia and a Hyundai blaming them for the reason why there's such an increase in crime in their city. Not the thieves' problem. The punishment is rare for individuals. One of the boys that was caught in a stolen car this year in Milwaukee, on video, he says he stole 300 or 400 cars so far since in the last 2 years. He spent 21 days in juvenile. Portland PD last year had 8,024 cars stolen out of Portland. They're only an hour and a half away from us. A lot of what's going on, crime-wise, is due to defund the police that started in 2020. Portland PD in July of 2020, that lost $15 million out of their budget. And that $15 million, again, was not added in the 2021 cycle. The call social media-wise was for $50 million to be taken from Portland PD. Many cities throughout the country suffered worse than that percentage-wise. I don't know if you saw it, but about a month ago, Mayor Wheeler was on newscast at a meeting. The chief of police for Portland PD was there, and because of social media pressure being put on the mayor and the council piece and the council persons in Portland, because of how bad the crime is up there, he told the chief of police who he can fire at any given time, because the mayor's the head of the Portland Police Bureau, that he didn't want to hear about manpower shortages anymore. He didn't want to hear about funding. He didn't want to hear about anything. It was the chief's job to get the crime under control. No help from anybody else. It was just the chief's job to do it. So, not trying to be a downer on everybody, really not. But people have to take social media posts for a grain of salt. Southern Poverty Mississippi, Southern Poverty Media Group, whoever they are really. They took a survey and 56% of American adults believe that social media is false. That what's on it is false. But we have so many people that do nothing but believe it. And I have countless records of lies, social media. And I don't need to go into it, but it's lies. And they lie, and they lie, and they lie, and they lie. And most of the stuff that they lie about, if I were to do it as a law enforcement officer, I'd be terminated, my certification would be taken away, the DA's office would brady me, and I'd probably be criminally charged. So hopefully, going forward, we don't have all this misinformation going out that people are eating up or drinking these people's Kool-Aid. And things go forward, and hopefully my next month's crime stats looks exactly or even better than the one I have here. And you know what? Doesn't look too bad. Step 3. One interesting thing I want to tell you about. Last week, get a call from a gentleman. His $5,000 bike was stolen off his vehicle while he was in taking a shower. And he came out and his bike was gone. In fact, half the bike rack was missing too. And he had it all locked down, secured and everything. And I thought, you know, these guys usually aren't cutting away bike racks off cars. But I took this report. 2 hours later, the sheriff's department put out a notice to all of us that they found a really nice high quality bike, but part of the bike rack still attached on the Delray Beach ramp. So this guy had gone out early in the morning, rode his bike on the beach like he always does, put it back in his car, and as he's coming up the beach ramp, the bike breaks off the bicycle ramp, lays in the middle of the ramp. What I do find is curious is that when he parked his car in the driveway, he didn't notice that his bike wasn't on top of his car. So that's pretty much where we're at for, thank you for the extra time, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions, council people, Mayor?
I don't at this time, Chief. Thank you very much.
Come in and see me anytime.
It isn't Chief Hutch.
Yes. Miss Christie, is it all right if I share my screen?
Yes, give me just a second.
Yeah.
Okay, give it a try.
For those of you that don't know, I want to introduce you to Division Chief James Hutchinson. He is a paid member, one of 2 paid members of our fire department. And with Chief Como being out today, James is taking over.
Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Sweet. Council. So today, for the fire report for fire department, I have a couple different things I'm going to talk about. The August call report, a wildfire update for our area and for the state, a station safety and operational concerns update, as well as a kind of a comment regarding water rescue program for the fire department versus the Coast Guard. So for the month of August, we had 71 calls for service, 33 of them being in the city, 24 in the district. In comparison to last month, which we had 0 calls that we sent 8 out to other districts, this month we had 17. 12 of them were Seaside. This included a structure fire, 3 surf rescues on Seaside's beach, as well as multiple medical calls during high call volume. We assisted Warrenton with 2 separate structure fires at different times. We responded to requests for move up and coverage during a structure fire in Cannon Beach. And we deployed 2 crews during the month of August with the Office of Oregon State Fire Marshal. We received aid 4 times during that month. All of them were wildland related. 3 of them were from the Department of Forestry, 1 was for a bark dust fire, another one was for an illegal burn, and then a smoke investigation. The last one on there being Seaside came and assisted us on one of the 2 incidences we had for fires on Little Beach at the end of the month. In comparison to last year in August, we had 83 calls for service. And so we're still sitting at about 24 calls ahead of the year's total, and on track to exceed the record of 660 calls for the year. It was also notable as for last year in August, we also sent a mobilized crew with the Office of State Fire Marshal down to Lakeview for 7 days for a wildfire as well. Which leads into my second part of my report. For the 2022 wildfire update. Since June 1st, the Office of State Fire Marshals deployed 35 task forces throughout the state through 4 different mobilizations to include even down to California. Gerhard has been fortunate enough out of those 4 mobilizations. Sorry about that. So Garrett's been pretty fortunate out of those 4 mobilizations to send crews out on 3 of them. It's important to note that when we send crews out on these mobilizations, that we aren't really losing a whole lot. We're losing maybe an engine and some crew for a short duration of time. For instance, on the Miller Road fire, our apparatus deployed, when it came back, it made revenue upwards of $5,000 for the department. On the Rum Creek fire, our fire chief's pay, working 24 hours a day for the 10 days that he was deployed, paid for all of $2,563 some dollars in his paycheck. And then on the Double Creek fire, which we still have crews deployed to, the fire's grown at about 60 plus or minus 60,000 acres. It is expected to be deployed for upwards of 7 to 14 days. That $5,000 I mentioned from the Miller Road fire, our crews were only gone for 3 days and made that amount of money. So we can imagine what crews will be bringing home from the Double Creek fire. During these last 2 mobilizations, we were able to staff a second alarm wildfire in our own fire district, just off of Little Beach and the Wellington access. And many of you have probably heard either from the paper or heard from word of mouth kind of what happened. But I do have a short summary for those that really haven't heard, which is from the press release that I had put out. So at 2:39 in the morning, Gerhard Fire was dispatched for a grass fire in the area of Little Beach. First arriving units observed an approximately 20-foot by 50-foot creeping fire into the tree line with infrequent tree torching. A second alarm was called to the initial size of the fire, rate of growth, distance crews would have to travel, and the materials that were burning. Further assessment of the fire revealed an estimated 50-foot by 400-foot fire that had made its way into the tree line along the dune. Crews were able to make access to the fire through a fire trail, commonly known as the Wellington Beach Access, and bring equipment down to the fire. Some removal of trees and scotch broom were necessary to ensure safe turnarounds for both fire apparatus as well as escape routes for fire personnel should the fire grow out of control. The fire was brought under control at 5:20 in the morning. The fire at that time was plumbed by hoses and it was 100% lined, which I'll go into a little bit further detail later. The Department of Forestry crews worked with Gerhard Fire to ensure that the fire was 100% out and even ensured with additional checks throughout the week that the fire was out, getting cold to the touch. The cause of the fire was identified as an unattended debris burn near the shoreline along the water from earlier in the night. Out of that, we made an attempt to remind individuals both from our community and from Clatsop County that we're in fire season. Debris and pile burning is prohibited, as well as even the burning of driftwood from our beaches. It's important to note, much like structure fires, wildland incidents can be very manpower intensive. It takes a lot of people getting out there and hands on the fire to get things taken care of. The biggest difference between a structure fire or wildland fire is time, in essence. A structure fire is a race comparable to maybe a 100-meter dash. It's over, it's done with. The first line goes in the door and we put water on the fire and it's close to being under control. Whereas a wildland fire is, you could call it a marathon. It's not fast. It's not fast because they have to be confined to an area of origin or to try to limit the growth of the fire. It goes into controlling it, mitigating fuels between where the fire is at and where the fire may go to kind of prevent that spread. This includes introducing water or even retardant to the area. Plumbing the fire, getting hoses and water supply completely surrounding it. Extinguishing it, identifying that all the flames are gone. Lighting the fire is taking all the burnt materials from the outer edges and bringing it back to the center, removing it from anything else that may be combustible. Mopping it up, using a methodical approach from one side to another to ensure that everything that they touch on the ground, even with a bare hand, is cold to the touch. It isn't going to reignite. And then rehabbing is one of the more important parts after a fire. It's having crews re-enter the area, whether it's removing trees that are now a hazard because the root system is gone when the fire went through. And then it could also be, for instance, a lot of fires will bring in heavy machinery, which thankfully we didn't have to do on this incident. They'll bring in dozers and essentially you can pave roadways out of that. So coming back in after the fire and doing rehab is taking all of that impact that we've created to put out the fire and create control lines and try to bring it back to a state in which it doesn't have as much impact on it. It's cleaning it up. All of this, from confining it all the way to rehabbing it, can take weeks, if not months. And some of the larger wildfire cases, such as the Eagle Creek fire that was in the gorge, or even fires in California, can take up to years to bring back the community. Currently tonight, our crews are actually going to be headed out there. They have a medical drill that they're going to transition from, and they're going to try and rehab much of the trail that's out there and try and clean up what had to be cut down to create those accesses and create escape routes for fire crews that were working in the area. That's actually where our fire chief is right now. After being gone for 10 days on deployment, this was kind of a very beneficial opportunity for him to kind of reintegrate, coming back to the department, meet and touch base with the crews, and then get back in with it for this next month, city council first, where you'll see him next time, probably, if not sooner. There we go. So for my next communication, I'm sorry, everything is really small on there. I did not anticipate that. So what I wanted to go over here is provide communication in regards to that within the last year, we were asked to create a list of safety and or operational concerns in regarding to the condition of the current fire station next door. In summary, the replacement of the bay doors checked a number of boxes regarding security of the station, ventilation, the prevention of ultraviolet degradation of our personal protective equipment that is housed in there, humidity, heating, and environmental control of the building. Listed up there in the picture off to the right is a number of quotes that were taken in order to replace all of the 4 bay doors that are next door. But looking at the prices that are on there, there is some large numbers. The largest one being in excess of $75,000. And understanding that that's not something that's super attainable, we looked at too. What can we do, not going for the catastrophic, but what can we do now that would be appropriate, affordable, to take care of it? So on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, we looked at, and from one of the people that we talked to previously about 4 replacements, we said, hey, what can we do to make this minimal? What can we do to repair or add what we need to what's currently in place to make it happen? And that came in just a little bit under $13,000. Because we don't have, per se, apples to apples quotes as to the 2 different, into the full replacement and to minimal repairs and whatnot. I don't have everything that I would need to present to the city council or to the public at this time. And my hope is to have that prepared for you guys in the October meeting. Okay, and so my last piece of my report for the council is, it has been brought to our attention that some people are still concerned regarding Gerhart Fire having a water rescue program or re-implementing one. In essence, Gerhart Fire covers 28 square miles of response area with a roster of 24 volunteers that are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year with a variable schedule in between. In comparison, the Coast Guard covers an area of 885 square miles of response area. A fraction of that is even serving inland search and rescue, so not even involving our coastline. They do this on a daily basis with one helicopter, and they do it with a crew of 3 personnel. They do have an additional helicopter there that's on base, that's ready to fly, but the crews on call can be anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes away from the base. So they're not ready to fly at a moment's notice. If there's a delayed response from aircraft from the Coast Guard, Station Cape Disappointment can launch a boat crew, but to get down to our area or the area that they would need to respond to can sometimes even take up to an hour depending on certain conditions. The re-implementation of this program has carried significant improvement in regards to our response as a department, especially in this last year alone. We've seen an increase in not only response to our waters along the coastline, but in the seaside speeches as well. Seaside during one weekend of August initiated 17 separate rescue efforts for swimmers in distress. On that same weekend, the ocean claimed the life of a male in his 50s. Not 3 weeks later, claimed another. Seaside Fire alone has had 34 surf rescue responses. Some of that we've actually even been a part of. However, the Coast Guard wasn't always in the right place at the right time to be in the area to help for most of these. Out of those 34 instances or those 34 responses, Coast Guard was there once. While during the darkest of night, during that one instance, fire crews were not able to safely deploy swimmers or personnel into the water. And this is where the resources of the U.S. Coast Guard were invaluable. There were even 4 cases in Gerhart to which we responded to water rescue calls in our own district. The Coast Guard didn't even make it to those instances because victims had already been assisted out of the water. When I asked Seaside about their observed response time for the U.S. Coast Guard, they reported a 10 to 15 minute response time, although those rescuers aren't happening in a fraction of that time. Therefore, we'd like to note our appreciation for the community, for the members of council, for the support that we have received in re-implementing this program to the area, enabling us to be ready because those minutes, they count. And that concludes my report for the city council and public.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? All right,
I'm going to excuse myself and I'm going to meet my crew out on the track.
thank you.
Thank you.
City treasurer.
Okay, so let's talk about revenues. So this month, we have been receiving some franchise fees payments. Most noteworthy this month was one from Spectrum Charter Communications. We get 4 payments a year, so that was our first installment. The city's also received our final payment of $181,467.89 for the American Rescue Plan Fund. And just to remind everybody, the acronym is CLFRF, and that's the Federal Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund that was established under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And it was designed for cities to receive the funds for response and recovery of COVID-19 public health emergencies. They have recently, just in the last few months, come out with the final FAQs of what that money is for. And we've talked about it a few times, but it is very restrictive, and we'll work to figure out how those monies will be spent. We have not spent any of those funds. We received half of them last year and half of them this year. The city has received a total, so the total amount we received is $362,935. And the funds were put in the general fund, the water fund, and the road district fund. And the city has also received apportionments in Fund 45, the state revenue sharing, and Fund 60, the state street. Those are our normal appropriations that we received. So that's not unusual. We just received payments this month, last month. In expenditures, the fire department has salaries in the conflagration salary accounts, which will eventually be offset in revenue accounts. Gerhardt's local fire department has participated in 2 mobilizations assist, which Hutch had mentioned, the Miller Road fire and the Rum Creek fire. And also as part of the mobilization in that line item, the Hood to Coast reimbursed for a couple of firefighters. So there was some salary in there for them too. In Fund 20, the debt service, the city's made our water bond interest payments on our bond that were already out there. In Fund 30, water fund, payments have been made to the Sounder Strategies for water rights compliance and reporting services, as well as for the City of Warrenton water purchases this last month. And in Fund 45, state revenue sharing, the grant awards have been processed and checks were sent out to our local organizations. So we approved those in the budgeting process through an application process, and we sent those checks out to those local organizations. In August, we were notified that our auditors are now required to communicate significant risks to counselors as part of the audit process. They have always submitted a report to the council, but apparently now they wanted us to put a specific letter in the council packet. So there is a letter in correspondence from our accountants, Acuity, that outlines some of the items that are risks that were identified in the report to the city council year end June 30, 2021. So you guys did receive that. And new counselors, I can get you a copy. It's not anything new. They just sent the correspondence saying that they are going to be doing our new audit. These were issues that they had seen before and that they will be looking for them. So they're from the 2020-2021 fiscal year. The correspondence dated June 8 is simply notification of their intent to do our audit, the plan scope, the timing of the audit, and the significant risks that they'll be reviewing. I can confidently say that many of those issues have been corrected, and we have done our best to try to fix all of them, and we'll continue to work on those. And that the auditors did come on August 25th. They were scheduled for 2 days and they were here for about 3.5 hours. We had done most of everything in advance thanks to technology. So they only needed to come and review certain documents. Things went really well, and they will prepare again a complete audit with a complete report to the council. And they usually come in January or February and present to you. So you will hear from them again. The audit has to be completed and submitted to the state by December 31st. So it will definitely be January and February before we hear from them. In person, they'll send us the audit as soon as it's done. We will be making some revisions to our request for proposal for the building inspection services. We still are using a temporary employment agreement. We have not hired a permanent building inspector official, but we have an agreement in place until we can find someone. We did not have a lot of interest the last time, and so we're going to try to make a couple of modifications and re-release that RFP to try to get somebody to come. I know Seaside also has a building official opening. And at this point, you know, we don't have the need for a full-time person, so we have to have the right person apply. That's everything.
Thank you, Justine. City Attorney, Peter.
I guess I'm going to continue the trend of not particularly cherry reports. I think I've mentioned during prior reports that there were a couple of election items that had been brought to my attention that I was working with appropriate officials on. And to provide just some background, the law in Oregon, as I understand it, which was affirmed in the case Fagan, or Christoph v. Fagan, which was the columnist Nick Christoph, who briefly was running for governor before it was determined that he was not a resident, is that in Oregon, and this issue came up in our short-term rentals, people have a domicile, traditionally considered their place of abode is where they live and work. They can have more than one residence, but they can only have one domicile. And your domicile is where you reside, where you're a resident, and where you would vote from. In instances where people have more than one residence, it's kind of a subjective test in Oregon. It's not cut or dry, and people look at a variety of factors. The people that would look being the county clerk or the secretary of state to determine where someone's domicile is. That would also help determine whether they're qualified to seek office, whether it be a House seat or a city council or what have you. Those questions come up from time to time because it's not unusual for a city to have a residence requirement. So after the election, but before the vote was certified, concerns were expressed to me that people that were not domiciled in Gerhardt had registered to vote in Gerhardt, including people that were domiciled out of state, people that did not own a house or rent a house or have any ownership interests in a house in Gerhardt, which that kind of information, frankly, that just never happens, not in our modern history as far as I'm aware. There's one example in North Carolina, but overall, my belief is voter fraud, if you want to call it that, simply doesn't happen. I called a district attorney who's very experienced, who I believe had dealt with these sort of issues, who was generous with his time in discussing them with me, what my ethical obligations might be, as well as course of action based on what had happened in that district attorney's county, which is a larger, not the largest, but a large county. In Oregon, I spoke with an attorney at the Department of Justice that I had worked with in the past in order to further refine what a process would be like if there were concerns that people who were not domiciled or qualified Gerhardt electors had cast a vote, and was put in touch with an investigator at the Secretary of State's office, whose advice I followed. I think the good news is a lot of people that may have registered to vote for the election that may not have been qualified electors did not vote in the election. There are some concerns that people that might not have been qualified electors did. Allegedly, somebody who was deceased in 2020 ballot was cast in their name, which obviously would be problematic. And again, people that resided out of state that didn't own or rent property in Gerhardt that seemingly could not argue that Gerhardt was their domicile, that they may have voted in the election. A list of people was provided to me, which I, after consultation with the county council, provided to her. And the county clerk, as I understand it, I've not had any conversations with county council beyond after submitting the materials. Frankly, not the job of the city attorney to do an investigation. The information that I was provided seemed credible. I felt that any sort of investigatory thing by me, other than looking at the obituary for the individual alleged to be deceased, probably was a bad idea, because ultimately it's the county clerk and the Secretary of State that look at these sort of things. I received a public records request from someone who was on the list. Having the name on the list does not mean that anyone did anything wrong. It doesn't mean that they weren't a qualified elector. As I said earlier, in Oregon, it's not like other states where if you reside in the state or at an address for X number of days, you vote there, and if you don't, you don't. Our tests are more subjective. If people want to read about it, the Christoph case is an excellent kind of primer. Further, people expressed concern that people were spreading misinformation as to people not voting where they were domiciled, but rather voting from wherever they want, which is not the law in Oregon, as I understand it, or as Oregon courts have said. So I think that there are probably some people that got some letters, including some people that maybe should not have, because the tests are subjective. That I think I've gotten some phone calls from people that were very upset. I can understand why they were upset. Again, I did what I believed I needed to ethically do in consultation with several other attorneys, including a district attorney and an attorney at the Department of Justice, and in concert with the Secretary of State's office. So this is a conversation I never thought I would have. And I consider it just incredibly regrettable. If I were someone that had been misled, perhaps into believing that despite not owning or renting property in Gerhardt, not being domiciled here, being domiciled somewhere else, because there's special rules for people that have no domicile whatsoever, I would be very angry, I think, at the people that had misled me. If I had been aware that there were these conversations prior to the election, and I likely would have tried to schedule an agenda item or something just to provide some clarity on the law as I understand it, which again was decided by the Oregon Supreme Court in this year, 2022. So it's not just the case from 1906. It's not just the cases that I cited in our short-term rental when the question of residence versus domicile was an issue. It's recently been decided by the Oregon Supreme Court. Again, there are likely names on there that should be on there, and there's some that probably shouldn't be. I'm not the person that generated the list. I actually don't know who did generate the list. It was provided to me. The issue that was flagged that caused all this to be flagged is that a gentleman claimed that City Hall was his residence. Nobody lives at City Hall. That's what first, I believe, alerted people to the problem as it was happening. And I hope that we have more clarity before the next election. So I hope people understand this and what their rights are. Again, I think I can understand why people would be confused, particularly if people were citing the cases from prior to the Rajneeshis, which basically changed Oregon's voting laws, including how long before the election you have to register to vote, as well as there's some cases involving people that don't have a domicile that, were living in RV parks because their domicile was an RV. I think that could add to confusion as well. So it is probably the most depressing legal city attorney update I have ever had to provide to a city council, certainly to Gerhardt. It's just so regrettable that this happened, and I hope it doesn't happen again. Again, I passed the election. I passed the information that I received along because I believe I had an ethical obligation to do so. I would have provided to the county clerk and secretary of state even if I didn't, because I believe that election integrity is so incredibly important. It's been undermined for the last however many years, and I defended it, saying the only modern case I was aware of is with that North Carolina 9th congressional district. So it's Very regrettable that I now have to say that I think it was in that district and also perhaps here in Gerhard. I think a lot of the people that may have done this were good people acting in good faith that had bad information. And I don't know, I didn't do any other investigation, but we have at least one public records request that we're sorting through. I provided the list to that person that requested it. I will be working in concert with the county council and anyone else as more requests come in. Where the county is in their process, I don't know. Where the Secretary of State is, I don't know. So that is what I have for you tonight.
Thank you very much, Peter. All right, City Administrator, Pat.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll keep this short. I'm not going to go over my entire administrator's report. I'm just going to get a few of the highlights. And first, before I start, I did not remind you, Mayor Carey, we need to make an adjustment to the agenda as well. And if you wanted to take care of that now, take a break. Here, you're going to add our visitor up front.
Right, after correspondence with consensus, I was going to move Ken Schonkweiler from ODOT, his report in front of the visitors section, because he is waiting on us and we are going on rather slowly. If that's all right with everybody, if I could get a yes.
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 Thank you. We'll move Ken in front of visitors. We need to add something to new business, a little discussion on our executive meeting. If everyone's in agreement, can I get a yes from you?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify a couple of things that have been talked about tonight, also there's been some criticism about the fire department sending out some of these people to these fires that are going out in Oregon. Again, the city is completely reimbursed for all of the wages and salaries that are spent on that. Our volunteers are paid an hourly wage while they're out there, and our vehicles are also paid an hourly wage, which goes into a reserve account for future vehicle work, which works out pretty well. Not to mention the experience that they're getting out there and bringing it back to Gerhard. Another issue also is our replacement of retired Vince Yokiyama, our sergeant here at the police department. He retired some time ago. We have been struggling to replace Vince as an officer. A couple things are going on with that. Some of the things that the chief was alluding to as far as the difficulties of hiring officers these days. Part of it is what Gerhard is paying is a lot less than most of it, especially the larger cities in Oregon, such as $48,000 sign-on bonuses and things like that. We just don't have that available to us. But the other thing that's really kind of hindering us is the housing issue that's going on in Clatsop County. I'm really happy that Jeff Adams from Cannon Beach has headed up this and brought these cities together. We've got some good conversations going on. Brent, Carol, Angelina, and I are all involved in the meetings. But essentially what we're working with is a 3.9% affordable housing in this county. 3.9%, generally a community is shooting for 20%. 3.9% is very, very low. And so when you're trying to recruit people to come into this community and they don't have any housing, that's a big issue. So we're starting to focus on that. It's going to be a lot of work to do that with all factions, both the Planning Commission, City Council, and the public to work on that. We're having those conversations. Spencer Kyle, a new city administrator with City of Seaside is starting. Esther Moberg, new city administrator with the City of Warrenton, and the City of Astoria is now starting a search process after Brett Estes took another job at the state. There are various department head positions that are coming up in these cities with some difficulty in filling them due to all these issues. So more to report on that, but those are just some of the situations that we're working on. Water conservation plan draft, we have received that. We're working through it again. We'll be bringing that to the council here soon. We have talked about the auditors, vacation rentals, no major complaints filed, one parking issue, and that was taken care of. Playground equipment is starting to get put together. We have some of the missing parts that have been received, and we're working around the availability of some of the installers and starting to get a group of people together to help with that. We are planning on September 23rd of having the engineered wood chips delivered. We intend to have everything in the ground prior to that. We intend to have a wall around, just a small stem wall, 12 inches around the play gym. And then we can install those, the chips. There's probably gonna be about, I don't know, close to 15, 20 dump truck loads of chips that are going to be shred, and a volunteer effort would be great to help with that. It will be fun. Mechanic and Watershed Council, many of you have, on the council have volunteered for that. That's been great. We've got 2 more dates coming up in September that will be announced on the blog. So come out. We're going to start then in the late fall. Part of this grant was to provide the pollinator plants. Those will start to be planted. And if you'd like to volunteer for that, that is much more fun than pulling the ivy. So keep an eye out for that as well. And we'll plant some things together that'll be good for your heart. Work sessions, no, landscape seemed to be a success. I didn't receive any complaints, and they provided the fire department with some tickets that were able to be resold as part of their fundraiser efforts. And Landscape donated a $1,500 donation to the Deer Heart Volunteer Fire Department. There was some question about whether or not we were charging them to have this event up at the park. We didn't. There was no charge. The park is free to use for anybody. This event was well thought out, and then they made a donation to the Volunteer Fire Department, which I thought was great. That's all that I've got to report for now. Any questions?
Chad, I haven't seen any notifications for volunteers for working on the playground equipment. Will there be?
There will be. We just got confirmation beginning of this week about the wood chips. Those have been the difficulty. So we're looking at the 23rd delivery, probably an effort on the 23rd, 24th, 25th to work through that, and we'll be posting it soon.
And how about the actual construction of the apparatus?
The construction is actually more easily done and probably safer with a smaller group of people using the machinery that we have, the boltings and things like that. When there is an opportunity, we'll try to find it, but right now there just isn't. We're waiting for some parts and putting it together. So I think that the best opportunity for volunteers will be with the chips.
Okay, I think you're going to have a lot of disappointed people that wanted to help.
Yeah, there's just so many areas to screw in at one time. So even keeping a couple, but I do understand. And we have had some neighborhood supervisors come by and lend their help. So that's been good as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That it?
That's it, sir.
Thank you, Chad. Okay, on the correspondence, everyone's got that in their packet. You saw the letter from the pickleball,
Yes.
and it's nice that they're getting so many people. We'll have to visit that in the fall, because I don't feel like we need to do anything at this time, but we have got it on our radar, Wally, if you're listening. All right, on to Ken Schonkweiler. ODOT, are you on?
I'm on, Counselor. Thank you for the enthusiasm with my last name too. So again, thank you all for having me today. I appreciate it. I am just here to give a couple of brief updates on the US 101 Gearhart facility plan. So I think last time when we spoke, that was back in the spring, and we were talking about some of the concepts that we had for the US 101 corridor. After that, we had a public involvement, or well, an online open house. We sent out a number of postcards throughout the community. We promoted it on Nextdoor. We got some good press from the Seaside Signal, and we got a lot of comments back. It was great. From those comments, we were able to work with our stakeholder advisory team and our project management team to make some additional decisions on the final facility plan, which I believe is in your all's packet today. Again, these improvements that we've discussed have been narrowed down and whittled down into a more comprehensive document. These range from supporting the traditional 3-lane cross-section that was originally identified in the Gearhart Transportation System Plan, a number of transit investments, some streetscape improvements, possibly some vegetation or some just lighting at key intersections, a number of pedestrian crossings throughout the corridor, bicycle lanes, and then some traffic calming measures on US 101. I wanted to present what is essentially the most recent and possibly last draft to the council in your packet, and just invite the council to send us any additional comments if you were unable to participate during the latest round of public involvement. Some last and final key updates from this plan, and relating those to the public feedback. Again, we did have a potential roundabout solution that was included in the document. We got a lot of feedback to both positive and negative on a roundabout, just as far as a traffic calming measure. And I think as a project management team, really just decided to include it as an aspirational project, just due to the benefits of how that would address congestion on Gearhart Lane, provide some traffic calming, and then just generally improve access throughout the city. The preferred cross-section, again, would just be a stop controlled intersection where there's just typically a stop sign, and then to make a left turn, they can do a 2-stage left turn out of Gearhart Lane onto US 101 or make a right turn. But we did include the roundabout as a more aspirational project. I think I do want to kind of open it up to the council and just ask if there's any immediate questions or comments, concerns, and then after that, talk about some next steps.
Well, the obvious question is you've got some cost estimates there. As time goes on, those estimates will no longer be accurate. And so just some kind of guidance from you on when funding could possibly come through for this. How much of that funding total budget will the city be required to pony up to make it happen? And how soon could it begin?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilor Warren. The short answer is that for a lot of this, we have no idea where the funding is going to come from, right? So the planning document is set there to give us an idea that we can then use to pursue grants, pursue possibly even ODOT funding grants that pop up. Maybe if there's a particular high crash section, which we would obviously never want to happen, but we could use our safety funding to address that in the future. The main point of this document is to really coalesce the community around a set of ideas that we can work to get these improvements on the ground in the future. What we do have coming up as far as funding on US 101 is some funding to do the design for the US 101 Pacific signal rebuild. As you all know, that signal is in particularly bad shape. The curb ramps are non-compliant, and we do have some funding in our maintenance unit to come up with a design. What we'll do from there is just look for grants and keep our eyes open and coordinate back and forth with the city to try to see if we can leverage onto that project and expand that scope and build the improvements as listed in the corridor plan.
Great.
Anyone else have any questions? Yeah. No? Okay, I don't believe we've got any questions on this, Ken.
Okay, well, that's
Thank
great.
you
I
for
think-
all your work, Ken. It looks like a nice plan. Hope we can make it happen.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. So just to circle back on some next steps, because this is a facility plan, we typically don't ask the city to necessarily adopt it. We actually adopt it at the statewide level. We'll try to work on that in the next couple of months. I'll send a letter to city staff, just asking them if the information's accurate and consistent with your comprehensive plan. I hope Chad Sweet would say that it is, since he was on the project management team. And then we'll get this thing adopted and coordinate on future funding as it pops up.
That's wonderful to hear. Anything we can do to help move it along is something we'll do. When I was elected in how long ago was that? 2014. One of the first things I did when I came on board is I stated in council concerns that I thought we needed to go to a 3-lane road through Gearhart because of the left turn incidents that we were having. And anything we can do to move that along would be great. So thank you for doing this, and let us know what we can do to help.
Yeah, well, thank you all, and thank you city staff for participating. I know this took a lot of Chad and Officer Bowman and the rest of city staff's time, and it was great to have everybody along for the ride. It was a relatively smooth project. So we'll keep you posted, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Good. Thank you very much, Ken. Visitors. First up, Beth Cameron. I see her on.
Oh, there I am. Okay, Beth Cameron, 2906 Pine Court. I had the opportunity to listen in on the August 30th work session, and there were a few things I kind of wanted to revisit. First, I was struck by the comment from Council Member Warren, and then confirmed by our city manager, that the council isn't in charge of the city employees. Rather, the council leads by policy, not operations. Mr. Sweet then alluded to maybe he was in charge of them, but that was unclear to me, so maybe not. I was left wondering if they work with complete autonomy. And if that's the case, does it mean that they have a job no matter their performance until they decide to quit, retire, move on, or die? If that is so, where can I get in on that gig? I'm also concerned about the number and scope of hats that our city manager wears. It's unfathomable the number of areas he is in charge of, both currently and in the event of a disaster. Perhaps the fact I'm one of those dreaded and inconsequential newbies has allowed me to see red flags as years of city dysfunction has not yet clouded my vision. Y'all need to understand and recognize that giving one person so much power and control sets them up to establish their own little fiefdom. And in fact, many would say it already has happened. I understand that your positions on the city council, whether elected or appointed, are unpaid. But when you agreed to take on your role, certain expectations of sharing the load were implied. For example, during the August 30th work session, Dana expressed concern over Chad taking on the role of press secretary during a disaster. Chad offered it to Brent, and while Brent didn't come right out and refuse, sure didn't seem like he was interested. And I might add, none of the rest of you volunteered either. So once again, the job falls to Chad, giving him complete control over the narrative presented to the public. Y'all need to think about that, considering the lack of apparent trust in the city government a substantial portion of the Gerhardt taxpayers already have. Finally, I'm confused over why the potential development of homes at the cottages has triggered an immediate need to deal with the city's water system. What about all of the Gerhardt taxpayers who have been told since the 70s they needed to wait on repairs to the original lines in and around the oldest parts of the city? They have paid into the water system for years, decades really. In fact, they have paid the lion's share of both the first and the second water bonds, and yet they weren't valued enough to have their water mains updated prior to this potential UGB land swap. Instead, they've had to live with the loss of water due to broken mains, black sludge settling out of their water, unbelievable amounts of chlorine, and levels of arsenic. But y'all are hot to extend the lines to the cottages by tearing up Pine Ridge Drive, all the while saying a plan needs to be developed and studies need to be made for replacing the oldest transmission lines. At this point, the current taxpayers of Gerhardt should be asking themselves, what the hell? Then at the end of the work session, we hear you would be voting on the plan without community involvement. I took this as a giant middle finger to all of the existing homeowners who have paid into an inadequate water system over the years. They should be first on the list for repairs, not the last. People, this behavior has got to stop. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Beth. Really appreciate your comments. Jack Zimmerman.
Jack, I've got a couple of questions for Peter, if you're still there, Peter. Can you hear me?
Jack, if you're gonna announce yourself and give us your name.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Jack Zimmerman, 408 West Crucial Circle. Peter, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, I've got a question with regards to the Highlands annexation and the last discussions about 20 years of buildable lots and the fact that there may have been substantial errors and we don't have the 20 years of inventory. Can you explain to us the jurisdictional penalties if the city were to elect not to have 20 years? Maybe 14, 16, 18. And if you can't answer that question, are there any exemptions provided to small rural communities in Oregon that allows them not to have the 20-year inventory?
Well, the 20-year buildable lands inventory is, in some respects, a ceiling and a floor. If you do not have a 20-year buildable lands inventory, then at that point you would normally do a urban growth boundary expansion or a rezone of other zone properties that might not have developed in the past. As far as the tools that the state has in order to force cities to take action related to land use, the ones that I have seen them use in the past have been state shared revenues. So that would be gas tax, cigarette tax, alcohol tax, marijuana, cannabis tax. Those are all paid to cities based on their population. And in instances where cities have refused to take land use action, the most recent example is a city that refused to adopt a comprehensive plan. Those funds were withheld from the city. So that would be the penalty that I would expect them to use.
And there's no sensitivities to at least the city trying but not being able to expand the 20-year inventory. In other words, isn't there a little forgiveness in this part that you can't cram us into high density?
Well, practically speaking, it would be difficult for them to force us into high density because we're on septic and not sewer. So that creates limitations that a city that's on sanitary sewer might not have. So that would probably make it more likely that they would expect us to do things through an expansion versus upzoning because I don't know that we have the land or capacity to serve like a 5-story type of apartment complex. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but you know, we have a minimum lot size for a reason, and that's because the homes in Gearhart are on septic.
Second question for you, if I may. I believe you're aware, and I'm asking, are you responsible for the filing of the Secretary of State against me for soliciting funds without a PAC?
That was one of the allegations that was made that I passed along, was that you solicited political funds outside of a PAC. I don't know whether it's true or not.
Did you rely on any individual of the city or the city's agent or any individual or groups of individuals to direct you to do that?
I wouldn't be comfortable answering any questions if there's a Secretary of State investigation occurring. I don't think the Secretary of State's office would want me to provide anything other than the fact that, yes, I had been told that funds had been raised outside of a political action committee. And, you know, that's not something that happens in Oregon.
As an attorney that represents me and everyone else in this city, do you not feel an obligation to at least pick up the phone and call me and ask the question? Did I do that?
No, it's actually not my job to investigate. It's the job of, in some instances, the county clerk, and in other instances, the Secretary of State's office. I'm frankly uncomfortable with the level that I've already had in receiving information and transmitting it. But I did it under the advice of multiple attorneys who work for, in one instance, the county, in another instance, the Department of Justice, and then some others who dealt with these issues. So
I'm very sure that you are treading on very firm legal ground. Wouldn't question that.
Thank you, Jeff. Your time.
I'd like an exemption, please. Just a few more minutes, Mayor.
You may have.
Thank you. I'm going to make a request of you, Peter. The allegations that you've made in your filing are absolutely false. They are it is a lie to even suggest that I solicited funds. And so I'm going to very respectfully request that you, at your earliest convenience, remove that filing and complaint. You have no evidence to that effect. I can tell you personally, I never solicited anyone for funds. Much of the money that I spent was out of my pocket. And I believe this effort, including the challenges that you've done at Clatsop County, are done at the behest of people who are upset that they lost the fire bond. And I think you have a moral obligation to represent me too, and all the 40 other people and plus that you filed the challenge. So would you remove those challenges?
Well, I would disagree with everything you just said. I have a moral obligation to represent the city. If I receive information that I think may be credible, and I would not have passed along the information I had received if I didn't think it was credible, then I am in violation of my various oaths and as an officer of the court. If you or anyone else were soliciting money, were on Facebook, were on wherever, were asking people to chip in, when everyone in Gearhart, practically, it seems like, have political action committees that have been used in various elections. This isn't I have no way to explain what happened. It doesn't appear to be partisan in nature. It is people of all political parties or unaffiliated that are on the list. it doesn't seem to, God knows how it all happened because I'm not on social media and I don't know what happened. But I received the information I received. I have an obligation to report under certain circumstances, and that's what I did. And I do not represent any individual citizens or residents or whatever you call them in Gerhardt. I represent the city. I advise the city council on legal risk, and whatever a majority of them want to do is fine with me as long as it's not illegal. If it is illegal, I will explain to them I believe it is illegal, and I will help them find another attorney and resign. But beyond that, I represent the city. Now, I, as an attorney, have certain reporting obligations that would happen, whether that's happened in Gerhardt or whether it happened in another city. And, you know, people made the choices that they made. I'm not responsible for those choices. I hope nobody did anything wrong. I hope that, you know, there are not further issues, but the situation is what it is. I'm not an investigator. If you did nothing wrong, if you solicited no funds, and if you spent no funds on the election, then you'll be cleared by the Secretary of State's office.
Your argument there rings weak because you did choose information from special groups within the city. You had the opportunity, or your agent, whoever fed you that information, to call me.
Jack,
And you elected
your
not
time
to do
is
that.
up.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for the exemption.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, before we go on, may I ask one clarifying question of Peter? It'll take just a second.
Sure.
Peter, may I ask this question? One of Jack's questions was there anybody at the city who had told you about this or had initiated this investigation? And I think that should be clarified. Are you able to answer that question, whether or not a city employee?
No city employee initiated this.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I'd like to add something.
Okay.
I provided Mayor Smith with updates as this went along. I think staff was generally aware of some concerns. And I did ask them once the votes were final, I asked them to provide me with that list, which they would have had to provide not just to me, but to anyone. It's a public document. Staff had no involvement in any of this. And I want to make that clear. And I am disgusted that we're in the situation that we're in.
I agree. I feel the same way.
All right. Okay. We're going to move on. Tom Tees is on next. But thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Tom Tees, 292 Woodland Avenue. Kind of on the upside here, I'd like to thank the city and mostly Mark McFadden for doing the work on Woodland Avenue today. Our street kind of became almost a one-way street, and they came in and did a whole bunch of brush cutting. Special thank you to him. And one question, you don't need to answer. On the 101 improvement plan, I noticed that, you know, part of it is going to be a greenway maybe between the sidewalk and the highway. Who is going to take care of that? And the reason why I ask is I've seen up and down the coast where work has been done, and then after 2, 3, 4 years, the areas just turn to weeds. And I think that we need to make a long-term plan if we do that. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom, for your question. The idea is there are several different proposals in our packet. Some of them include a greenway and many of them include no greenway, just asphalt and vehicles and bikes and pedestrians. Just so you know, there are different scenarios that they have brought to us. I think it's 5.
Thank you.
Okay. If nobody else,
Mr. Mayor, there is, I have an email that I received. Not sure what they were requesting, but it is, just double check here. Yeah, Harold Gable just sent me an email that said agenda, but I'm not sure if that was a request to speak or not.
Okay.
Harold, are you on?
Okay.
I don't see it here.
All right, then. I'm gonna go.
sorry.
Oh, wait, I'm gonna. Carol?
Yeah,
I'm finally on. And I'm fine with what's happened here.
I'm sorry.
Hear me?
Who's speaking?
Okay, I'm
Is that
glad,
Harold?
yes.
Harold.
Okay, would you introduce yourself, please?
It's a challenge getting all these little buttons in the right order, but we're done. I'm really glad that we're laying things out tonight and covering a lot of things that need to be dealt with. Some were still subterfuge, we're skirting the points. Peter, you're very eloquent at times, but not direct and forceful enough to really come across with actually everything that's happened in a direct manner they can understand. It's there. I'm glad that Carrie, you've done a lot on this. I wasn't able to get through with everything, but you know, it's been a great meeting and I really appreciate all of things done in person that you've structured tonight to go forward. I hope the rest of the meetings are like this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Harold. Sir, I don't know your name.
I'm Pat Gilroy.
Pat Gilroy.
Yeah, 302 Nita. Been here, our family's been here forever. We're part of the Meadow crew down there, the old Niedermeyer crew, Todd's, all those people. Having said that, our names appeared on that list of voters that are being challenged. Just so you know, I mean, there's 3 of us in our household. We've been here, living here for almost 2 years. Everyone knows we have, the only residence we have is here. All our cars are registered here. Clatsop County is wondering what's going on here because Peter and I have gone back and forth. So we're trying to hash it out. But having said that, when we saw the list and found out all these regular people that have been contributing, and that I've been at these meetings, we've been doing all this to get a letter after we're registered with the county. We have our county registration card to say that someone in Gerhart, apparently it's not a city employee, but someone in Gerhart, through this city attorney, the power of a city attorney is challenging our vote, wants us to prove things, wants us to provide evidence. It's chilling, absolutely chilling. So it's offensive, and I think that Peter's doing his best. He's just the messenger. He says, I just handed this off. He did no investigation. But, you know, as an attorney also, I know the ethical obligations of having to look behind what's being presented. I mean, Jack, I didn't know about Jack's, but listening to that, I'd be so pissed at a city that is, I'd be so pissed at a city that is having their city attorney send rumors about something without any investigation. That the city attorney does run the rest of the city, runs the rest of being sued. You cannot go through voter rolls and take a neighbor. I could report every one of you to Tracy up at the county and say, rumor has it, these people don't live here. They should not be voting here. I know they're on Clatsop County. I know they got a voter registration card, but we're going to challenge them. And I could do that without any due diligence. And apparently, under Peter's theory, he just has to turn it over and every one of you will be investigated. If you do not respond, this is very important. City has to understand, if you do not respond, you can be taken off the voter roll and you get 2 weeks to respond.
and you have to provide a signature, proof of residence, members of your household, where your cars are registered, all that. That is a very chilling thing for a small community like ours. And who's ever doing that, who's ever behind it, I'm gonna find out. Peter knows I have a standing request for all the documents, same documents, who's ever making challenges about the rumor about Zimmerman, that's new to me. Who's ever challenging our residency, I wanna know how we want it on the list.
I would want the same thing.
Right.
You know, I cannot answer to any of that because I was not involved. And
I've heard that, that's the sad part, I've heard that from everybody, Peter can't tell us. I got the mayor of the city saying you can't, but I do have the county, Tracy of the county saying it's Gerhart city doing it. So think about that, it came from the city.
no, it did not come, well,
The mayor, that's the problem, the county is telling me the city is doing it.
okay, then I'll talk to Tracy so she changes her story because it's not the city.
Well, it came from Peter and the.
I'm sorry, it did not come from the mayor or this council.
Okay.
Okay, if Peter learned about some information and he felt that he needed to turn it in, that is what he did. And that he should do that because he's a lawyer. I don't have the grasp on his oath of office. But I can tell you, I will call Tracy tomorrow and find out why she's saying the city is doing this.
Because it's on city of Gerhart letterhead.
Well, it's not on City of Gerhart letterhead. No, it's not. No, it's not on City of Gerhart letterhead. It went to the county because the Secretary of State's office told me it needed to go to the county.
Okay,
So I mean, that's the problem.
all right.
So what happened is Jack didn't have it.
It's a problem that the city should be reflecting on, and the city attorney should also be reflecting on.
Well, I just found out about it, so I'll reflect on it tonight, and when I talk to Tracy tomorrow, I will let her know how upset I am.
Okay,
How about talking to the person that gave
Yeah.
the
I have
the
it.
list?
Look, this is not a roundtable discussion.
It should be.
It should be.
Okay, then maybe we'll talk about doing something like that, but right now I'm not. This is the city council meeting. I want to get through this.
Attended by city residents.
I know, but it is attended by Jack.
Yeah,
Really?
good, I'm glad, gotta let us talk.
No, what you need to do is settle down.
I'm not upset, you're upset.
No, what I am is,
Hot.
I am
You're hot.
agitated because I have just been accused of knowing about something I had no idea was going on.
Peter just said he had the list.
Peter.
Did not say he had the list.
Who gave the list?
No, I said that I apprised him of the steps that I was instructed to take. He didn't direct me. I told him I had a conversation with the Secretary of State's office and they told me.
Where's the text? Because it's wrong again. Okay. We're done with the visitor section. We're moving on to ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 934. An ordinance amending the Gerhart City Code to follow state public contracting rules and procurement processes. Now, we have gone over this before. Our master of money has suggested we do this. Are there any changes to it that you want to put in before we have a motion and a discussion?
My only comment, excuse me, my only comment was last meeting that we do go with the method of the state for the lesser amount of $10,000 for the minimum goods and services quote, and I was not too sure about how high we should go. And I'm waiting to hear from the other council members on that, but the procurement for at the bottom should be at least $10,000. For small. I think that's fair.
Okay,
Or we could adopt what the state recommends. Either way, I'm in.
okay. All right, can we get a motion and then we'll go to discussion, and if we want, we'll change at that time to read his desire.
Move to approve the ordinance 934.
Okay.
And I will second that. I will second that.
Thank you, Brent. All right, we've got a second. We can go to discussion. You want to change the intermediate to $10,000?
No, the lesser amount. The small amount. The intermediate, I wasn't sure with.
Oh, you're talking the small amount is
At least $10,000 for procurement.
So she wants to follow the state down there at the bottom
Right.
box for that one. But
And the other two, the intermediate and the large amount, I was still open on.
okay.
So either way, like I said, is going to be fine. I just wanted to hear from the rest of the council.
Oh, I think I share Rita's concerns. It's, I mean, in the intermediate and the large, we're talking about a lot of money for a small little town like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think mostly what we're concerned about is oversight, which Chad has told us that we still would have. I just think that we need some reassurances or just a little bit better explanation so everybody understands what that means.
Okay. Chad, do you want to answer to that?
I'll do my best, and then I will defer also to Ms. Justine, but basically this is a procurement. At what levels of procurement do we have to have a certain type of quote? It does not necessarily give us permission to purchase these things for $150,000 outright without their permission. Most of all because none of our budget line items would support that. The only budget line items that might support that would be our reserve funds, and our reserve funds are dictated by ordinance in that we have to come to the city council for permission to spend any money out of those. But we still intend to be fiscally responsible. But what the different types of procurement between formal quotes, competitive sealed and sealed bidding and proposals is really the ability for the city to go out and get these quotes to the best of our ability, to have those quotes be as fair as possible. If we were to take smaller amounts as we currently have for the city of Gearhart and require a formal quote for anything that's over $20,000, which is not a lot these days. These our particular rules were written back in the early 80s, 70s, and things have changed. This will allow us to use a formal quote process for the intermediate amounts between 10 and 150. Meaning we accept those quotes. They're it's open, solicited by email, phone, or fax, invitation to bids. We go back and forth with detailed specifications, and we're able to take those quotes non-sealed, present them to you, and make our recommendation. Companies that are in that realm where we're doing business with are not accustomed to of any other, well, I can't say any other city, excuse me, of most all cities in Gearhart do not have to do a formal quote for something so low. It creates a time issue, and to tell you the truth, formal quotes are not necessarily the best way to go because you choose one as it comes in. All three quotes could have been unreasonably high and then work with that. So an open formal quote is a little easier for us to do that. But the communication still comes to the council, the permission is still going to come to you. This just changes the quote process to make it a little bit easier for us to do business in today's age.
Has any other city in the state adopted something that was modified from the state recommendation?
Yes.
So we wouldn't be alone in saying that this was too high. Well, go ahead. No, I'm done for now.
Okay, so if I'm understanding incorrectly, and I'm trying to synopsize in a way that people can understand, by procurement, he means when we're making our purchases.
Yeah.
He's making, not deciding who to spend to, but when we're seeking a way to get a good that we need. If we don't have the bids, a requirement for bids at the lower level, it could open it up to our local businesses being more competitive and being more able to get our business, which I think is desirable. I'd like to stay local as much as possible. it also, as he said, it simplifies things for him, but it doesn't mean that he's then going to say, oh, this is the bid and this is what we're gonna go with. I've seen bids before that are problematic because they come in the lowest, but you know, because you know the people in the area, you know that's not gonna be a quality, person or a quality job, even though it's the lowest, and that can be problematic also with bids. I have seen that before. So I am comfortable with going with what the state rules are, and I think that it would probably be less confusing for all if we did do that. And I can see some benefit down the road too.
Awesome. Nothing? Peter? Brad?
Well, I said this last time, the state has limitations set. The Oregon League of Cities is comfortable with it. Our auditors are comfortable with it. Our city staff is comfortable with it. We still have controls in place. And it opens up the possibility of additional bids coming in. So I think it's a good thing. I support it.
Master of money.
I think that it is better to be on the system. I understand on the state system. I understand the concern with the idea of lowering, feeling like you're increasing the bar. But I feel like the most important thing is following the law to me. Like getting some sort of system that everybody understands, that is consistent, that everybody, when you talk to other people, when you go to conferences, when you talk with the auditors, they send the same message versus confusing, like our staff gets confused of where it falls in here. And that is hard because then they make mistakes and we don't follow procurement all the time. So I feel like that it's not opening up an opportunity. They still have budget line items. You guys still see things that we write. And it is a barrier to me that I think is existing right now. And I feel like we should go with my recommendation would be to go with the procurement by the state. And if it doesn't work and we continue to see problems, then maybe tighten them back up.
Okay. We've got a motion, we got a second to accept it. Let's vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries.
Thank you very much. And we will bring this again to you again next month, where we will have vote on again. Excuse me, to read it by title only.
Okay.
And then it'll become ordinance 38 there.
All right, next, resolution 974, weapons ban from public Gerhart City meetings. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We've talked about this in a few meetings now. I made some changes to the ordinance to allow for this type of restriction to be at any meeting that we so choose for the city business, whether that be a work session or what have you, or another event. So we made all those changes, updated the resolution, and it's ready for you to discuss.
Can I have a motion and a second if you want to discuss?
I'll give you a motion.
I'll second.
Discussion. Brent, you got anything?
I just would like to say that this is a common thing for governments to have. The state of Oregon has a similar rule for state offices. I think we should do it.
Anyone else?
Well, I just learned a lot from Counselor Counselor down there, about, Counselor Dana. And I really have learned a lot due to her expertise in the law enforcement field. And I would like to second the motion about banning guns at the Dearborn City Council meetings.
It's Gerard City meetings, not council. Okay, so
Yes.
thank you. Okay, well, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, just one thing I noticed on the resolution that's proposed there, there's a typo. I have a hard time with this. I'm gonna admit I have a very hard time with this because I am a CCW holder myself, and I am very protective of gun rights. However, since I've been in the city, the disruption I've seen over these threats that seem to pop up and they don't even seem to have any, I mean, nobody can say this is where it started or this, and then it just goes and everybody gets worried, and we can't have citizens worried and afraid to come here. It's too disruptive. We can't keep closing down every time we get a rumor and keeping people out of city council meetings. And that is why I'm struggling with this, but I'm leaning towards, I'm gonna vote yes, just to, so that we can have the least intrusive way, or that we can get back to business, normal business, without searching people unless it's absolutely necessary, without people having fear that they, you know, they come here and sit and be part of the conversation and that they're gonna be at harm.
Good, thank you. Anyone else?
I had to turn in my purse. I couldn't even go to a concert carrying a purse a couple of weeks ago. It's becoming a common thing. It's unfortunate, really unfortunate. But I see more.
Well, shall we vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No nays. Passes. We have no old business. Under new business, we have the seismic resiliency mitigation plan adoption. Rank.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
can I move to the table this for the council meeting?
Yeah, I agree to table also, so I'll second that.
Consensus.
Fine with me. Aye.
Okay. Stapled.
We'll make some of the adjustments that were talked about, including the letter from Mr. Schultz, and come back to you with some of the changes that want to respond. Thank you.
We had the executive session and we had a philosophical difference that needed to be ironed out. Is there any discussion that you want to have about it? No. Just look, I'm not this way, you know, there's three of you. It's not just you. No?
Are you?
Someone can make a motion.
Okay.
Someone cannot make a motion and we won't talk about it. That's the whole thing right there. All right, well, there's no motion, so we're not going to do anything. Council concerns, Brent?
Oh, nothing that I would like to discuss tonight. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Dana?
No, I think I've said my piece tonight.
Austin, Rita,
No, thank you.
my page of concerns going on. Some of the file until next time. I have no concerns. I'll take a motion.
Mayor, could I say something before we finish?
Peter, you may say anything you want.
All right, I can think of all the ways this can go, so I'd like to do a little clarification. I spot checked some of the names on the list, including the gentleman who was allegedly dead, and found the obituary for that person that mentioned their love of that had the date of birth that the voter had, that had the exact same name that the voter had, that, you know, mentioned love of the coast. It certainly appeared to be the same person. It's possible there could be two people with the exact same name, same date of birth in Gearhart, one deceased and one not. Of course, I'm not going to say anything 100% because I'm not the investigator. There were some other people that very clearly appeared to be domiciled in some, again, was spot check, and no member of the Gilroy family was spot checked. And Pat and I have had some nice phone conversations, or I don't know if they were nice, but they were polite and pleasant. I understand why he's concerned. I am sorry for anyone that is legitimately a Gearhart elector domiciled in Gearhart if their name was on the list. But voting integrity is also an issue that's important. And if there are people in Gearhart that believe that deceased people may have voted in the election and that other people who are not qualified voted in the election, then it's important that they know going forward that these are free and fair elections that are being decided by Gearhart electors domiciled in Gearhart. If there had been no evidence that there was money being raised, but not in a PAC, and no solicitations of money, then nothing would have been sent to the Secretary of State's office. But screenshots are screenshots, and sometimes digital is forever. And based on what I saw in consultation with other attorneys, I provided what I provided to the Secretary of State's office. And I hope there was no violation. And I hope what appeared to be prima facie evidence was not. And if that's the case, then it's unfortunate, but obviously there's some confusion because there appeared to be prima facie evidence of money being raised and spent on an elections issue outside the PAC. So with that, I would like to point out, because I am a glass half full kind of guy, that I think this is the first time that Harold Gable has expressed appreciation for my performance during a meeting, and I have been the city attorney for almost 10 years. So thank you, Harold. It had been an extremely rough meeting for me, but glad I finally kind of broke through.
Peter, you're absolutely welcome. The thing that crossed my mind was that Ms. Travenko, did you ask her for all of the information of the positive votes to look at, as well as the negative votes? Were you looking for an area, because we lost, I should say, the vote lost by over 67%, 2/3 of the people. I appreciate your honesty coming forward. I just want the rest of the story here. And Travenko provided you with all of the yes votes as well as the no votes, and you investigated all of those. That's what I'm hoping for your answer would be.
Well, I don't know how any of the names voted, because that's not something the county, I think, would ever provide. I do know that there weren't enough alleged people to change the outcome of the election, which is really good. And I do know that there didn't appear to be any party affiliation. So you literally had every party, not just one party and not just independents. So you had them all. So
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like a
Bye,
motion to
guys.
adjourn.
I can't say.
Goodbye.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for coming, everybody.
Good night.